and gentlemen, greetings. Zelrix here for Let's Talk Theory, the show where we analyze some ideas and hypotheses around our favorite subjects. How great was Spider-Man No Way Home? Without any doubt, the best Spider-Man from the MCU. I mean, let's just not act like it was a difficult task to achieve. The previous two were... okay. Spider-Man is, without any doubt, the most iconic Marvel character and probably the only S-tier superhero from the Red and White Company. Seriously, little experiment that I already did on the channel. If I put red and blue together, you're thinking about Spider-Man, even though Superman and other characters fit the color palette too. But that said, a hero is only as great as the villain they face, and there is one villain archetype, one specific archetype that we need to go over. The biggest enemy, the ultimate foe, the most dangerous opponent. And in the case of Peter Parker, it's a controversial question. Venom, the Lizard, Doctor Octopus, the Chameleon, the Green Goblin, the Kingpin. It is time to use the codes of writing to deduce who is Spider-Man's real Arch Nemesis. Before we begin, a couple of disclaimers. Spider-Man has had over 50 years of existence behind him. His stories have been re-released, reappropriated, readapted, and remade countless times. Affirming we can answer any question on Peter's writing with 100% accuracy is a lie. So you'll guess it, although as I am trying to be objective in this analysis, there will be a little part of subjectivity and interpretation. At the end of today's episode, you will have my answer on who the true nemesis of the web slinger is, but if your answer is different, it is okay, and don't forget to debate in the comment section. Then you can subscribe and activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes up, and don't forget to smash that like button, it's always so appreciated. Also, you can come back each week to see me react and complain about pop culture, because that is what LT is all about. Also, we are here to debate about the comic universe, so although I will be using video games, TV shows, movies and alternate realities as reference points, this video mainly concerned Peter Parker of Earth 616, aka the main Marvel continuity. Please also note that this video will contain No Way Home spoilers, Spider-Man PS4 spoilers, Venom spoilers, as well as general MCU spoilers. If you're not 100% caught up, that is your spoiler warning. But it has been drawn to my attention that you might not be 100% sure about the true nature of a nemesis, so here's a little catch-up class. The Nemesis is, before being a character, a relationship. If I tell you that the Joker is Batman's nemesis, then it means that Batman is the Joker's nemesis too. Also, the Nemesis is regarded as the greatest enemy of our hero. The ultimate pain in the ass, if you want, a bit like Michael Bay and M. Night Shyamalan to anyone with good taste. Why aren't Thanos or Galactus Spider-Man's nemesis despite them being more powerful than any of his villains? Because these two characters are mainly Avengers or Fantastic Four villains and level threat before being part of Spider-Man's rogue gallery. And also the nemesis must be iconic. Some might say that they must be the most iconic villain of the hero. I told you that this video was greatly subjective, but if you tell me that the big wheel is Spider-Man's Arch Nemesis, you're wrong. And an idiot! The Nemesis is not to be confused with the rival. At some point, the rival helps the main character by making them the best version of themselves they could ever hope to be, but also they can come from the same side, they can be good friends, they can work together, while the Nemesis is solely an obstacle and a villain. Alright, so now that we're all on the same page, let's talk theory. The candidates. You may ask many Spider-Man fans who they consider to be the true nemesis of the wall crawler, but generally speaking, three names will come back. We have Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin, Otto Octavius, aka Doctor Octopus, and Eddie Brock, aka Venom. And here, right off the bat, we can eliminate one of them. Sorry to all the Clentar fans, but Venom was never written to be a nemesis. He's not even that much of a villain anymore. And that's for many reasons. Venom first debuted in 1988 with Amazing Spider-Man number 299. 26 years after Spider-Man first debuted in 1962 with the book Amazing Fantasy. Meanwhile, we can retrace the origin of Dr. Octopus all the way back in 1963 with Amazing Spider-Man number 3. That's right, he was here from day 1. Well, day 3 technically. Day 4 if you count Amazing Fantasy since it's the first appearance, but... You're a nerd! Shut up, go back to your cage! And Green Goblin appeared on the number 14 of the same series, so by the time Venom came around, Octopus and Goblin had already had almost 3 decades to anchor themselves as Spider-Man's true nemesises. Nemesises? They already had almost 3 decades to anchor themselves as very impressive enemies of Spider-Man. Plus, let's not forget that at the origin, Venom was mainly a failure villain meant to serve, above other things, on the success of the Black Spider suit from the Secret War saga. So to all of you Spider-Man 3 haters, know that the origin story of Venom in this film and his character development are one of the most comic accurate things in modern cinema. Yeah, keep trashing on it, keep going, I feed on hatred. Not to forget that, despite everything, Venom has grown to turn more into an anti-hero than a villain. Obviously, the movies with Tom Hardy are responsible for that, but that's something we can track back to the early 90s. We often see Parker and Brock teaming up to defeat greater villain, but there is also Carnage, there's Shriek, there's Anti-Venom, there is Toxin. At this point, Venom has grown too much into his own direction to be considered Spider-Man's nemesis. He is even at the center of his own storyline recently with the character of Null. A storyline that if you haven't checked out, what are you doing? It's phenomenal. So for all these reasons, Venom has to leave the roster and it is now up to Dr. Octopus and the Green Goblin to debate for the true title of Arch Nemesis. Venom, your defeat is saluted with great respect. Just kidding, I've never really cared about Venom. Yeah, someone like that exists somehow. Dr. Octopus. Honor to seniority, as I was saying, Dr. Octopus is the eldest of the 2 villains preceding Osborn of 1 year. So let's look at these arguments. Most Spider-Man villains represent a dark part of Peter Parker, idea that I develop more in this video right here. For Otto Octavius, he is what Spider-Man would become without his ethics. Just like Peter Parker, Otto Octavius is the result of a freak accident that turned him into what he is today. He is a brilliant mind who had a difficult childhood. But Spider-Man being a hero and Otto a villain, we understand that Octopus will cross lines that Peter will not. Themes heavily developed in many mediums, such as Spider-Man PS4, where the obsession of Otto will push him to release a deadly virus on Manhattan, or in Spider-Man 2, where his devotion to power and to his research will cause him to fall to the dark side, unfortunately guided by his mechanical arms. Which is a very interesting scenaristic resort. Otto per se is not a bad person, he's just the unfortunate result of a butterfly effect that led a good man to his downfall. The Green Goblin. Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, father to Harry Osborn, Peter's best friend. Also a bit of Peter's mentor, billionaire, founder of Oscorp, great scientist, and also one of the most iconic villains of the early 2000s. Just like Peter, Norman is powerful, but he is also rich. And this is where most of the interesting character development between our two parties is drawn. Peter has to create his own equipment himself with everyday materials. While Norman, he is rich, he's heavily relying on his fortune and his team composed of renowned scientists to furnish him in interesting weapons and equipments. And it is true not only for Norman Osborn, but also Harry Osborn, his son, who wore the costume and the glider multiple times. You probably guessed it by now, but Norman Osborn is the mirror image of Spider-Man, what Peter would be without his heavy sense of duty and responsibility. As I said, Norman is also the president of Oscorp, the company manufacturing the spider that gave Peter his power in the most recent iteration of Spider-Man. Because yes, did you know that originally Peter was not bitten at Oscorp? It was just some science expo at the General Techtronic Laboratory East. So no, Norman Osborn didn't create Spider-Man. Sorry to bust a myth. And the next point is probably what you are thinking of if you think heavily that Norman Osborn is the true Nemesis. The Green Goblin killed Gwen Stacy, Spidey's love interest. This moment is not only regarded as Spider-Man's greatest failure, since Peter himself feels like he is responsible for her death in some ways, but this is also a decisive point in Spider-Man's comic book history, since Gwen Stacy will remain dead for the following issues. And that is also what, among other things, led Peter Parker to fall in love with MJ. So with all this information, who do you think deserves the title of worst enemy of Spider-Man? A true nemesis. Sorry to all the Goblin lovers, but Otto Octavius is without any doubt Spider-Man's worst enemy, and that's for many reasons. Above the fact that their stories are pretty similar, above the fact that Otto is the eldest, above the fact that Otto and Peter see themselves in each other, there are many clues towards the fact that Dr. Octopus should have priority over Green Goblin. I used Norman Osborn a lot as an example of Green Goblin in this video, but Harry Osborn was also the Green Goblin. And let's not forget that there is also the Hobgoblin, the Grey Goblin, the Red Goblin, you get it, there is a lot of goblins. But that just makes Norman Osborn less special. Well, don't get me wrong, there has been many versions of Dr. Octopus, but de facto, when we say Dr. Octopus, we think about Otto Octavius. While when you talk about the Green Goblin, you often need to specify at least if you're talking about Harry or Norman. Octavius is just too recognizable as the face of the character, and he's also probably the most recognizable villain in Spider-Man's rogue gallery in other medium than comics. And I don't mean that lightly, think about it. In No Way Home, even though he doesn't have that much screen time, he is the first villain Peter faces at the beginning of the movie, and he is the first villain to be revealed in the trailers. Outside of the movie industry, he's also the main villain in Spider-Man PS4, one of the greatest villains in the Spectacular Spider-Man, probably the best TV show about Spider-Man to ever be made. And if you're still disappointed of the early cancellation on the cliffhanger of this spectacular show, just know that I made a theory about what Season 3 would be like right here. But the greatest evidence about the fact that Otto is the true Arch Nemesis of Spider-Man comes once again from the comics. First of all, he was on the first team of Sinister Six in 1964. He even acted as their leader, position that he will repeat in many iterations, once again like in Spectacular Spider-Man. But also, there is the Amazing Spider-Man number 700 from 2012. The conclusion of the Amazing Spider-Man with 700 issue. The 50th anniversary of Spider-Man. The climax of the adventure of the web slinger. Making it the longest Marvel comic run to be ever written and one of the longest run in comic books history. And who's the villain in this issue? Otto Octavius. At the end of the story, Octopus manages to switch body with Spider-Man and kills Peter. Comic books. Otto, now in a new body, he is free from the control of the tentacles and realizes that he wants to be a hero, not a villain. And it is pushed by the spirit of Peter Parker that Octavius vowed to be the greatest hero that ever was, that he will go beyond what Spider-Man was, and that is proudly that he proclaims himself the superior Spider-Man. Okay, it's a comic book, the spirit of Peter Parker was resurrected a few months later, but the point is, Otto is the one who killed Spider-Man and vowed to surpass him. He is the final antagonist Peter faces. We can say that one of the two characters dying ends both their story and opens the door to future storytellers. The moment Spider-Man passes away, Otto becomes a good guy. Obviously, there was an in-universe explanation, but from a purely narrative standpoint, if there was no Spider-Man, why have a Dr. Octopus? Just like the Joker in the universe of Dark Knight Returns, who falls back into crimes after years in a psychiatric hospital.
Think he cares about the weather?
I don't think this one's cared about anything for a long time.
Guess crazy has its moments. Guy doesn't even sweat. Look at him.
Drawing them into corresponding intersecting patterns. You could say Batman creates his own enemies.
Batman? I'm tired of hearing about him. Why can't he just let things go, the way the rest of us do?
Exactly as I warned. The Batman has infected the minds of Gotham's youth.
Gotham City belongs to the Batman.
Batman.
darling.
And that's because his nemesis has come back. One cannot exist without the other. They give each other meaning, and this relationship echoes Peter and Otto's in that way. And that, my friends, is why, among other reasons, I believe Dr. Octopus to be the true Arch Nemesis of Spider-Man. But what about you guys? Who do you think is the worst enemy of Spider-Man? Don't forget to tell me that in the comment section down below. Then subscribe and activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes up. Share this video with all your spectacular Spider-Man friends, and as always, thanks for watching.